Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with talented modern-day saxophonist and composer James Brandon Lewis. He grew up in the music-rich Buffalo, New York area and went on to Howard University to study with the likes of Benny Golson. Over the course of our conversation, this very impassioned and deep cat talked about his approach to music, what has been going on lately with a very busy itinerary, albums that he loved the most growing up, and what the future may just bring, along with many more things. Please dig this interview, my friends.
What's been going on with you lately?
So basically, I just came back off the road. I did a couple of festivals. I played in Paris about 2 weeks ago. Unfortunate, events happened after that. Played at Duke de Lombard, and then I went to Toulouse and played a jazz festival there, probably one of the oldest festivals in France, or in Toulouse. And then after that, I went to Belgrade, Serbia, and played the Belgrade International Jazz Festival, and that was really cool. And then we wrapped up the tour in Rotterdam. So it was about 12 days, give or take. And it was cool. It was fun. We played the music off of my trio. Played the music off of Days of Freeman. It wasn't Jamaluddin or Rudy, so that would have been amazing. That's the latest. I mean, the guys that I have now are both based out of D.C. Luke Stewart on bass, Warren Trey Crudup. Each amazing, young musicians. A lot of great young musicians coming up out of the Washington, D.C. area in the last couple of years. That's the latest. And just continuing to press forward. I'm going to bring this same group to the Winter Jazz Fest, which is in January here in New York. And got some plans for the summer, and just trying to push the ball forward, stay motivated, stay humble, stay grounded and centered, in myself, and, always try to just create music from a life lived and living, That's pretty much my mindset about things. So
yeah, that's cool. I remember there was a line out of a biography on Bob Dylan, and at one point early in his career, he was just not sure what he should write about. And they were like, man, write about what's going on around you. What is it? And it's like,
right.
Every time it's simple, but it's very true. There's like some level of profundity that you're trying to find, but it's you. You're the one making it. It's your world.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, sometimes it can, like, I know there are a lot of some of my artists friends who are like, they're creating art, and it's good art, but it's kind of seclusive. It's not really representative of, not all the time representative, and it's not a critique. It's just their mode of operation. How they get in their mode of creating what it is that they do. It's often away from the public and what's going on. It's kind of like you go in your studio, and then it's you dealing with your, what's happening in the studio,
Right.
But whereas myself, I kind of like, I'm just sort of just an emotionally kind of sensitive person. And so I can't, if I'm playing a long tone, I'm trying to play that long tone in a way that is speaking to whatever I'm dealing with, whether it's personal, whether it's outside, stuff, tragedy or happiness or goodness, and how to shape that note to reflect that, because just to play a note that's all it is. It's just playing a note. If it doesn't have any meaning behind it, or if you're not giving it that meaning, it goes beyond just some sort of technical skill set. It's like put within that note, and that's some other kind of thinking, but a lot of people do that. I mean, if you're in sports, you have these guys who are like constantly practicing, the visualization of the game, and making that shot at the end, and formulating that and, practicing this sort of mental imagery of that scenario. So it's the same, I think, in music. or any art.
So let me ask you this. Since we're kind of on the topic of current events and what's going on, we had a couple of musicians from Kansas City that were in Paris when everything went down last week. And
wow.
Since that happened, I've heard a lot of people were there, and I know that Paris has had a history, but give me an idea. It's always interesting to me with Europe, but more because I think Paris needs a little love. What is it about Paris that still gets jazz so much, that loves it, that craves it, that brings young cats from New York City to play it?
It's just they just have a great, just a great history and love and appreciation for the music. And that's dating back to, Miles Davis. And even before that, you had, Josephine Baker and Sidney Bechet going there, way back in the days, it's just a love for, a true love for the music. And I think that continues to be the case. Yeah, I mean, really, it's a beautiful thing. It's really, I think the same can be said, though, about the United States. I mean, there are definitely some pockets here in the United States that, have a strong love for the music. But I just think that it's just the power of music and its ability to transcend and reach people. I don't necessarily know. Sometimes I question that, whether or not is it the people or is it the music?
Yeah.
Because music is, the music was here before we were here, and so it's sort of out here in the atmosphere, and people reach up and grab it and say, oh wow, that's cool, and so I think that that's just the power of music, and Paris and so many other places, love the music, love jazz, love, it's America's music, I think it's a beautiful thing. And I always enjoy my time abroad, whether or not I'm in Paris or if I'm in Serbia or Germany or, wherever I'm at. I always feel a love for just artistry, just in general. It's just like, if you're giving it your all, there's definitely going to be people that will appreciate what it is you're trying to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's go back to the beginning of your life in Buffalo, New York. Talk to me about growing up in Buffalo. What kind of environment did you have that fostered a love of music and jazz?
Definitely. Well, let me first start off by saying that Buffalo is known more for there's a lot more going on in Buffalo than snow and a missed field goal. And 4 Super Bowl losses. Let me just start the conversation off.
Hey, we're from Kansas City. We're married to football misery. You're fine.
Yeah, right. Well, from a young age, even before I started picking up instruments, I always just had a love for, the emotions of music and how it made me feel, and how composers could paint certain emotions with music. I mean, I think I was always just drawn to that, and my mom picked up on that early on. And a funny story is, basically, she was, or long story short, basically, she told the band director that she wanted me to learn the instrument like Kenny G plays, and I said, the band director was like, oh, okay, yeah, I have the perfect thing. And in all actuality, he handed me a clarinet that was in 2 pieces. So one solid piece and a mouthpiece. And it was like one of those old like marching band clarinets, but it was only in two pieces, not, the traditional kind of, it's broken up into, different parts. You have the bell, and then, it's like 4 or 5 parts, whereas this was just 2 parts, the mouthpiece and then the whole, the rest of the instrument. So it looked like a soprano sax, but really he knew what he was doing. He just wanted, to, start me on the road of playing music. And my mom was like, oh, okay, great. And then, he said, yeah, that's a clarinet, And so I started when I was 9. And I think one of my first memories of wanting to learn different melodies and different things, I remember Mr. Holland's Opus came out, and And I was like, wow, okay, well, I have a clarinet. You know, I was a curious little kid. So I was like, well, I have a clarinet, and I think I can learn, you know, I can learn that melody, you know, and I'm like, okay, cool, you know, and I remember learning that and just gradually picking up different melodies. And eventually I auditioned for a performing arts school because I started playing clarinet in 4th grade, and my mom was a school teacher at the school. And so she didn't want me to end up in any of her classes. I mean, really, because that's like a conflict of interest, you know, going into 5th grade. So she signed me up for these music lessons and in-school lessons or whatever. And I ended up going to performing arts, Buffalo Academy for the Visual Performing Arts, which is like any other performing arts school, whether we're talking about LaGuardia or Houston. You know, from 5th grade to 12, I was in music school. It was great. I mean, they had other subjects, you know, math, science, and gym and all this kind of thing. Eventually, I just started practicing, learning clarinet stuff, and I was like auditioning for county band, and I always had a tendency to try to do my own thing or put my, you know, I think my natural tendency and who I am as a person is to always try to make things my way. It's not, you know, I'm not ever trying to just buck the system. I'm always just trying to be myself, be naturally who I am. And I remember a moment where I was playing some sort of clarinet concerto piece or whatever, and I was auditioning and for all county band, and I will never forget this moment. I was playing this piece, and I had added some vibrato to the clarinet, and I remember the first couple of lines was like dee 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 dee. And I had like added like vibrato and these kind of things and kind of hipped it up, and you know, or at least I thought I was hipping it up. And I'll never forget the teacher was like, well, you are not supposed to be playing clarinet with vibrato like that, you know. And I'll never forget that moment because here I am, a little kid, you know, just trying to have fun with music. And you know, she's like giving me all this vibe. So I didn't make it in all county band, but I remember I got a 92, and I think to place you had to get like a 95. So eventually, you know, I turned 12. I'm trying to fast forward the story as quick as I can, but I turned 12 or 11 on a road trip with my dad out to Colorado because he was living in Colorado. My mom lived in Buffalo. He came and picked me and my sister up, and long story short, we got a dog on the trip, you know, like they'd be, you know, like when you stop at a rest stop, you know, and there's like, sometimes there's people who are selling different kinds of things and selling dogs or cats or whatever, no different than anything you would see in New York in the subway, but just on a rest stop in the summertime. So we ended up getting this dog, you know, because typical kids, you were like, hey, we want a dog. And my dad's like, okay, you know, so we get a dog. And eventually, when we get to Colorado, we run into one of my dad's friends or whatever, and, you know, conversation led to music, and he's like, oh, I have an alto saxophone and blah, blah, blah. And of course, my little curiosity, you know, the bells in my head were like, oh, wow, he's got a saxophone. And I had already been wanting to play saxophone. And so, you know, there was an exchange, and, you know, I looked at the dog, and the guy, he seemed like he liked the dog. And I told my dad, well, you know, let's give him the dog. You know, I want the sax. You know, I didn't even ask my sister's opinion. You know, I don't even think she got a vote. It was like, well, let's get rid of this. And eventually I got a saxophone at the age of 11, and I turned 12 at the end of the summer. And so that's when private lessons outside of school started, was around 11 or 12. And that sometimes, you know, like there are a lot of people who are like, well, that's, you know, that's late, that's this, that's that. But I think for me, or at least the school that I went to, the teachers would have private lessons in school. So they would make provisions for those kids, you know, to get extra. So I had another lesson outside of school that my mom was eventually able to afford. And so I remember my first lesson, you know, he the sax teacher was just basically like, well, because my mom's a huge smooth jazz lover, and, he was trying to just introduce me to the basics. And where I'm from, Grover Washington Jr. is huge. Like he's from Buffalo. If you're a kid growing up in Buffalo and you're playing music, you're going to hear about Grover. But there's just a rich history of a lot of different musicians, whether we're talking about the Goo Goo Dolls or Rick James or Annie DeFranco. There's just a huge legacy of just all kinds of musicians who have come out of Buffalo. And so I remember buying, he told me to pick up a Charlie Parker record. And I remember going to this place called Record Theater. And I remember getting the Charlie Parker, it was like a Charlie Parker All-Stars, Bud Powell, Mingus, Max Roach, Dizzy. And and I remember putting the record on. I wasn't inspired. I was not inspired. I was intimidated. I was a kid that was intimidated. I looked at my sax and I was like, okay, is that what this is supposed to sound like? I'm not even close. That's how I felt at the time as a kid. I said, wow, I'm not even close, and but eventually I got inspired and got moved to really put my best foot forward and work, and then from there, I just continued to develop and checking out early players early on. I remember at a young age, but I had a lot of varied influences, so I would be the kid that would be playing like R&B 90s groups and then or hip hop. And then when my mom would yell, I'd say, okay, and I'd put on, John Coltrane and Rashid Ali, Interstellar Space, and then she'd really go ballistic. So I had a lot of varied influences, but I definitely was fortunate enough to check out as much of the canon as I could. Plus, I had an uncle who was a jazz lover who would get me downbeat in Jazz Time magazines when I was a kid. So instead of getting comic books, I'd be reading about jazz and who was out, it was just always, a part of my life, and then always infused with my life. It's just always been a part of my life, a part of my being, and I was drawn to it musically. And then I sang in choir as a kid, and when I started learning instruments, the church encouraged me to bring my instruments to church and play. And so I just had a lot of people who fostered that kind of love that I had already had within me, to create. And then eventually I ended up going to Howard University. I spent a year at Buffalo State College. Most people don't know that. I spent the year at Buffalo State College. Basically, long story short, is that I come from the middle class, which is in my mind, a great definition for the middle class is when I was applying for financial aid, and I think this is hilarious, but it, for me, defines the middle class, that people want to have these kind of discussions. It's basically like my mom didn't make enough money to send me to school, but we weren't technically poor enough to get aid.
Yeah.
So I couldn't go to any of my schools that I wanted to go to.
Yeah.
So I ended up at Buffalo State College, and I had got accepted to Berklee College of Music in Boston, but clearly they were already pretty damn expensive back in the days. And so I ended up at Buffalo State, and one of my good friends was at Howard University, a guy that I grew up with. And I had an instrumental gospel group. It was piano and sax growing up. And we played gospel music, we played jazz, we played R&B. We sort of just mixed it all together. But anyways, he came home from Howard. And, our conversation was I said, well, man, how's things going? And I was miserable because I was still at home. I was still around my friends. I didn't really feel like I was growing musically. And on top of that, my mom her elementary school was located on Buffalo State's campus. So here I am, a freshman, in college, going to school every day with his mom. I was just I was just annoyed. So my friend was telling me, he came home one Thanksgiving and we were just talking, and he says, well, I said, well, how's things going? He says, the music is great. The food is great. The women are great. I said, oh, really? You think I can get accepted to that school? And then once we got rid of all of the surfacey kind of conversation, he starts telling me about the history of the school, like how Donald Byrd founded the jazz program, and Wallace Roney went there, and Benny Golson, and Jerry Allen, and the list just kept going on and on. Donny Hathaway, Roberta Flack, and by the time he was finished, I said, well, man, do you think I could get into that school? And he said, yeah, and I remember just running in the house, and I got my audition tape because I'm right in that generation that, cassette tapes and CDs and, records were still around, but it was cassettes and CDs. And I remember just going in the house and getting all my materials and getting it to him. And next thing you know, I'm accepted to Howard, and it was a great experience going to that school. Grady Tate and Donald Byrd would be on campus, and we had concerts with Jerry Allen and Wallace Roney, and so it was great. It was a great experience.
And you've moved on from there to back up people like Katie Lang, Vanessa Williams, John Legend, and then you went to the jazz residency in Canada, and you were with Joshua Redman, Dave Douglas,
right,
and cats like that. What's it like to be around those? Even Benny Golson at Howard University. What is it like to be around that caliber of a performer?
The one thing that I will say is that, all the people that I've ever been fortunate enough to be around, they're all really, really gifted, but all really humble. I can't even think about, and I'm being completely honest, I can't even think about one person I've ever encountered, even amongst those people you just named, that weren't still pushing and still humbled, by music, by life, by their surroundings. It's just like when I eventually later on went to California Institute of the Arts, and I'm around, with Donna Leo Smith and Charlie Hayden, and they always just incorporated life into their classes. It just wasn't just theory and what's this or what's that, and I realized that they were human too. That's another thing. Like, when you're a kid and you're looking at these players, they're like your comic book heroes. You're like, wow, this is, wow, it's hard to not get caught up in the idolization. I remember a really growth in my own development in terms of feeling like I could like raise my hand or not raise my hand and allow my voice to be heard was when I moved out to Colorado after the Howard days, and I took some time away from school just to clear my mind and really work in the world of music. I was doing things professionally, and I remember having a conversation with my dad, and this was like my early 20s. Early, like 20, 21, maybe 19. And, no, probably 21, 22. And I remember having a conversation with my dad, and I was naming all these players. And my dad was like, I don't want to hear about any of those people. He says, what are you trying to do? What is it that you have to say? And it made me realize that, and he wasn't disrespecting them at all, but he, parents, who's better to tell you that they want to hear from you, than your parent? That's powerful. Your parents like, wait a second, you're telling me about this person, you're that, but what, wait, hold up. What's going on with you? What is it that you have to say? And your voice and what you have to say is as equally as valid as anybody else, and it's not even in the comparative, really. It's not, because we're all different personalities. So being around those players, it's no question. I don't even know I was still, I'm still like a fan of the music. I'm still a fan of different players, and, I still dig what other people are doing. So to be around those players, professional, human, humanity, it really doesn't get any better than that,
Yeah, absolutely. What was your first live gig like? What was your mentality going into it that you can think of?
My first live gig.
Yeah.
Wow. Actually, my first live gig happened when I was 15 or 16. Because, see, when I was in Buffalo, like, me and my friends were already playing throughout the city. We played some union events, we played some church concerts, we played some, historical history concerts, But I remember my first gig that I got paid was actually at a Catholic church for like some sort of jubilation Christmas thing, and I was given music, had to learn the music, and I remember getting paid $50. And I wasn't, that was the first time that I had been given the music and required to go to rehearsal, and even though I went to performing arts school from 5th grade to 12th, but it's a difference when, you're getting hired outside of school. And I don't know, I wasn't nervous. I was just like, wow, this is cool. You mean I can get paid? That was, because I never, even now it's always, of course I'm a professional musician, but it's always one of those things, early on, it never crossed my mind. I just knew that I wanted to play music. I wasn't like sitting here like, oh, I'm going to go into music, so I can get rich. Right. That wasn't ever my mindset. But professionally, I would say like professionally, my first gig, coming out of CalArts, because I had some time in between where I was doing some professional stuff, but coming out of CalArts, I was playing with Alfonso Johnson in his ensemble out in California. We were doing like original weather report stuff, and that was a really great experience. Taught me a lot about, once again, Alfonso Johnson's amazing. Another amazing player who's just so humble and so has a way of leading a band where it's not like a dictatorship. It's more like, all right, hey guys, I think we should work on this part right here.
Yeah.
Or this isn't sounding right, or make sure you take your charts home and just go over certain parts. So I think that overall, I don't know, all my professional experiences, I just try to give it my all. I've been like this since I was a little kid. I just try to make it count and let people know that I'm putting my whole being in the concert, and afterwards, I don't want to leave anything, up for debate on whether or not I was being professional or giving it 110, or even just like communicating a message that's beyond like being professional and all that. Just like, is this person like being for real? Like, I'm always like, if my grandmother shows up, my family member shows up, and they say, wow, that was amazing. I say, wow, okay, cool. That was cool. And, because they're not musicians, There's a clip of Bill Evans on YouTube where he's talking about how the lay person probably knows more music than the musician, because the musician is always dealing with it, where the lay person is able to hear it, for what it's supposed to be, where the musician is always like dealing with it, always, just always dealing with it, the technical parts of it, maybe I should play this and that, where the lay person gets to enjoy it, gets to hear, so then that's another level of, so yeah, I hope that answers your question.
That did, yeah. So let me ask you this, speaking of live, speaking of Bill Evans, all the influences that you've had in your life, musically, all the albums you listened to and all of these things, if you could get into a DeLorean and go back in time, punch the digits, go somewhere and see somebody, jazz specific, where would you go and who would you see?
I definitely want to go see, without a doubt, I would probably want to go see Charlie Parker without a doubt. And then probably after that, I'd really want to go see like Wardell Gray, Dewey Redman, Dexter Gordon. That would be great. It'd be good to see John Gilmore playing with Sun Ra. That would be great. So it's a lot of people that I would have loved to see. Mingus, that would have been just great. Eric Dolphy. Eric Dolphy.
Yeah.
That would definitely be awesome. Wow. I like that question, man. Thanks for asking me that, man. That's hip. The DeLorean, yeah.
Yeah. Get in that jazz time machine and go.
Right.
Let me ask you a simple question, but it's a profound one. Why do you love jazz?
Well, number one, it's the heart, and it's really the heart and soul of a lot of different things. It represents a lot of different things. It's a continuum of many historical events that occurred here in the United States, good and bad. And so, that being said, it was birthed out of a particular struggle and represents beauty, though, represents optimism and, forward movement that a lot of times any definitions that we give anything doesn't always really represent the thing in its purest form. It's like water, after if you put some iodine or some different food coloring in the water, it's still not as pure. But I feel like there's definitely room to grow. I loved it from a young age. My mom introduced me to it, and I fell in love with the emotion of it. You watch a lot of those clips of those guys, or experience a live jazz concert. When I was a kid, Dave Brubeck, his sax player later on after Paul Desmond, Bobby Militello, it's always around in Buffalo. So I got to hear him as a young kid. I got to hear a lot of people as a young kid. I grew up on the music, and so for me, it's like, wow, it's like a history book. I can I can go back and if people are curious, people from other countries, they say, well, where are you from and what kind of music is in America? Well, what are you about? Well, there's a whole history, there's a whole legacy of that music, and a lot of people made a lot of sacrifices for the music too, so and still do. A lot of people.
Yeah. Well, let's bring everything down as we kind of wind things down a little bit here to a very local level. And I want to ask you this. Everybody that's in your life has a perception of who you are. Your fans do, your parents do, your siblings, and friends. But who do you think you are?
I'm a pretty serious, philosophical, sensitive, overly sensitive, sometimes to my own detriment, sometimes, kind of guy. I believe in the Creator. I try to be a most heartfelt, kind person. Even though I'm in the public eye, I'm not always, that's never my goal. That's never been the goal for me. The goal is to just be a vessel for the music, to come through me. And, some people dig it, some people won't, but, I'm just me. I'm just James Brandon Lewis. I could be serious, I could be fun. I'm mostly serious, but not like mean, just more like kind of centered person, and kind of like, always thinking about life and thinking about things. Or, I'm an analytical person, When I was a kid, it was funny, I'm the kind of kid that would negotiate, if my mom was trying to give me a spanking, I would be negotiating, so I've always been this kind of like, peacemaker. I always like philosophy and different things, and reading Emerson and all this. So I'm just a cool laid back kind of guy. I'm maybe my music, I don't know. I don't spend too much time thinking about what my music is. I try to just create from a place of honesty, and people dig it, then that's cool.
Yeah.
If they don't dig it, that's cool too, because not everybody's gonna dig what you do, but if they don't dig it, then it wasn't for them to dig.
Yeah.
Really. So, wow, I've never had nobody ask me that. Who do I think I am? Wow. Well, I mean, on the surface, I think I'm about 6 feet. African American male. Got glasses. On the inside, I'm just, I try to be as serious as I can. I try to be as kind as I can to people, and try to take life as it comes. I live in New York, so life is coming fast every day.
Yeah.
And a lot of different. I also just try to separate. Like, even though we're doing this interview, I'm not even trying to just treat this like a regular conversation, because there are those things that, okay, cool, interviews and, this magazine or this or that, but it's still also like the humanity of it, to let people know, hey, hey, the weather is cool outside today, or,
Yeah.
Just try to be regular, like my dad always tells me, man, don't start reading your own press clippings, and basically what he's telling me is to just keep it even, keep it humble, keep it even, because the minute you start reading your own press clippings, it's like when me and him used to watch a lot of sports together, and, the minute you could always tell when a team is starting to read their own press, they might miss something or, miss that one play that could have put them, on top, and so yeah, I hope that answers your question. I'm just a humble guy, just trying to survive.
Yeah, you're definitely cool. I can tell that,
Yeah.
James, hey man, thanks for opening up. This was a pleasure, man.
Yeah, likewise, and thank you so much.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to yet another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players out there in Kansas City, New York, and all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to James for his deep music, his candid thoughts, and his time. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store, or you can visit the neonjazz.blogspot.com for all things Neon Jazz. Until next time, enjoy the music, my friends.
Neon Jazz.